a plan for that. She means it. And her plans represent the interests of all of us, not just the wealthy and well-connected. Welcome again, and thank you all for being here today. Thank you.
Happy Labor Day, Hampton Falls. First off, let's hear it again for Pam and Dennis Rice for hosting us today. And thank you guys so much. Before we get started, just a few quick housekeeping notes. Elizabeth is going to be staying to do selfies for everyone who wants one, where the selfie line will be forming. So if we could all head over in that direction. If you're interested in getting a selfie, our volunteers and staff will help everyone get in a single file line.
Okay.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Clark Fox. I am the field organizer with the Elizabeth Warren campaign here in Hampton Falls and the southeastern part of Rockingham County. Thank you. So in 2012, I showed up to college thinking that the American dream was as accessible to everyone as it had been to me and my family growing up, that if you worked hard and played by the rules, that you would have a chance to make it in America. And over the next 4 years, my eyes were open to a government that had been dominated by corporate and special interests. Wealth inequality, gun control, mass incarceration, systemic racism, climate change, the opioid crisis, every single issue with one common denominator: corruption. And I thought about getting in the fight after graduation. I even applied to work in Elizabeth Warren's Senate office, unsuccessfully. And in the end, I took a job in corporate America. In part, I had a big pile of student loans that I wanted to chip away at, but truthfully, I lacked the courage to get in the fight. And that job in corporate America was at a executive search firm. For the last 3 years, I was a headhunter, making rich people richer. And in 2016, I stayed on the sidelines. In an election with everything on the line, I stayed on the sidelines. I didn't knock on a door, I didn't make a phone call. Blinded by my privilege and comfort, I let down friends and allies who would be deeply vulnerable to this current administration. I knew I couldn't turn back the clock, but I promised I wouldn't make the same mistakes again in 2020. And after 3 years in a front row seat to such pervasive corporate greed, where talks of layoffs and slashed benefits are celebrated as, quote, strategic cost-cutting initiatives, I knew I wanted to work for a candidate who would hold those corporations and executives accountable and protect American families. And without question, I had to work for Elizabeth Warren, and it had to be this campaign. Elizabeth understands with perfect clarity the moral urgency of the moment that we're in, and she has the comprehensive plans to address all the big problems that we're up against. And the big structural change you're going to hear her talking about in a little bit isn't possible unless all of us come off the sidelines and get in the fight. This is a people-powered campaign, and every little bit helps, whether it's knocking on a door, hosting a house party, talking to your neighbors, or making 45 minutes out of your week to grab coffee with your local organizer. By the way. If you haven't already, there are a bunch of people around with clipboards, and I'd encourage you to make a commitment today to join this movement and get in this fight. I'm in this fight because it is time that we had an economy that worked for all of us. It's time that we had a government that reflected our values, and by God, it is time that we had a woman in the White House. When Elizabeth Warren is president, the American dream will be attainable for every American, and that's never been the case before. Thank you all so much for being here. We're going to get started in just a few minutes, but again, happy Labor Day, and let's get to work. Thanks.
Of American nuclear testing and with climate change.
Today, as this is Labor Day, we thought it would be appropriate to speak with you about our experiences with labor in the form of union organizing and childcare. These are two areas among many where we feel confident that Elizabeth will deliver as president. This past year has been exciting and challenging for us. Beyond a 65-hour labor, by far the biggest challenge has been finding an affordable and reliable daycare for Cyrilina. Harvard offers 12 weeks of unpaid leave, but like most other graduate students, I couldn't afford to forego a paycheck for 12 weeks when Cyrilina was born. Things got really tricky when Eric was laid off 2 weeks after Cyrilina was born. And with no family nearby, we put her on daycare waiting lists as soon as we left the hospital, but there wasn't an opening until 6 months later. This year, we're going to spend about $30,000 daycare and healthcare coverage for Cyrilina. That's 90% of my salary. By the time Cyrilina starts kindergarten, her daycare and healthcare will cost us as much as 4 years at UNH.
For the past 5 years, Carly and her colleagues have fought for a union. But Harvard is dragging its feet in negotiating a contract. It's a contract that will hopefully include subsidies for childcare and dependent health care. Now, we're fortunate because I'm now a member of the Newburyport Teachers Association, and we have a strong union contract. But when I was laid off, things didn't look so bright. And for so many people living in this country today, things aren't looking great either. This is why we need to elect Elizabeth, so that moms and dads and their kids, our families, can have a brighter future.
As parents, we are also teachers. We want to be able to teach Cyrilina that her government cares, and that we can elect leaders with a plan to fix our planet, our economy, our immigration policies, our healthcare system, childcare, and so much more, so that we all benefit. And this is why we are supporting Elizabeth Warren, because we know she can deliver. On this Labor Day, please join us in welcoming Elizabeth to Hampton Falls.
Special thank you to Pam and Dennis for opening up their backyard for all of us. What a beautiful way to do it. I'm so glad that all of you are here. I appreciate your being here. I know there are a lot of things you could be doing on Labor Day, but 2020 really matters. And not just for the next 4 years or the next 8 years, but for generations to come. And we all know that's going to come straight through the center of New Hampshire. So thank you all for taking the time to be here today to invest in your democracy. I appreciate it. Before we get started, I just want to say a word about the fact that we're here on Labor Day and what that means. When I did the official announcement for my campaign, I went to Lawrence, Massachusetts. I don't know how many of you know Lawrence, Massachusetts. Bread and Roses strike, right? Yeah. But I think about it, I thought about it on that day. I think about the women who worked in those mills. The women who had so little that they often lived 2 and 3 families to a room, who often had to choose between whether or not to heat the room or whether or not to be able to feed their children, who had so little at a time when the bosses were just getting wealthier and wealthier and wealthier in the textile trade, in the shoe trade, in one trade after another. And the day that the women got the news that their pay was going to be cut, here they were, think about the conditions they were working under. Children were working. 1 in every 3 adult workers at that mill lost their life by the time they were 25 years old. That's how dangerous the machines were. That's what it meant to breathe the dust that they were all breathing. But they got the word, and it spread through the factory that their wages were going to be cut. And here were women, mostly women, nearly all immigrants. They had come from 50 different countries. And they said, enough. We've had enough. And first in 2s and 3s, and then by the dozens, and then by the hundreds, they got up and they walked out. And that's what started the strike that changed America. These women who had so little put it all on the line to try to build a future. And they did it together. And here's the part that always got to me. You go back and read the papers. The bosses at the time, the management, were sure the women would never come together. And you know why? Because they were different from each other. They spoke different languages. They came from, as I said, 50 different countries. And yet the women decided they had more in common that mattered to them, and that they were going to put aside their differences and come together to build a life in America that would create opportunity for themselves and their children. And for me, that's what the labor movement is all about. So happy Labor Day to all of you. Our chance to come together. So I thought what I'd do today is I tell you a little bit about myself. I tell you a little bit about why I'm in this fight, although you may already have some sense of that. And then we do the most important thing. I'll stay as long as you want, and we'll do a selfie line. That'll be the fun part. You bet, you bet. So I was born and raised in Oklahoma. No? Okay, so I got 1 or 2. Okay. Yeah, you lived there for a while, right? We got a few people here. There aren't that many from Oklahoma. I have 3 older brothers. I'm what used to be called a late in life baby. My mother always just called me the surprise. And that's how it was. My 3 older brothers, who to this day are still referred to as the boys, to distinguish them from that when they came along so much later. The boys all went off and joined the military. My oldest brother, Don Reed, was career military, and he spent about 5.5 years off and on in combat in Vietnam. We were very lucky to get him back home. My second brother, John, was stationed overseas for about a year. My 3rd brother, David, trained as a combat medic. Now, this is important in our family because it gave rise to a rule in our family, and that is never choke in front of David. To this day, the man carries a sharpened pocket knife, and he is convinced he could perform an emergency tracheotomy. It gives us some exciting moments at Thanksgiving. Somebody goes, and everyone's like, David, no, sit down. We're good here. I love my 3 brothers. They've all moved back to Oklahoma now. I get back as often as I can to visit with them. When we were growing up, our daddy had a lot of different jobs. He sold paint, he sold fencing, he sold hardware, he sold rugs. And when I was in middle school, the boys were all gone by then, my daddy had a massive heart attack. And he was in the hospital for what seemed like a very long time. And for a while, we thought we were going to lose him. He pulled through, but when we got him back home, he couldn't work for a long, long time. And even now, I can remember the day when we lost the family station wagon. I can remember how my mama used to tuck me in at night, and she'd give me a kiss, and I always knew what was coming. She'd walk out of the room, close the door, lean back against it, and start to cry. I hear her. She never wanted to cry in front of me. And these are the times that I learned words like mortgage and foreclosure. And then one day I walked into my folks' bedroom, and laid out on the bed was the dress. Now, Some of you in here will know the dress. It's the one that only comes out for weddings, funerals, and graduations. And there's that dress laid out, and there's my mom in her slip and her stocking feet, and she's pacing. And she's saying, "We will not lose this house. We will not lose this house. We will not lose this house." She was 50 years old. She had never worked outside the home, and she was terrified. And she looks up and she sees me in the doorway. I'm just a kid. And she looks at me, and she looks at that dress, and she looks at me, and she wipes her face, pulls that dress on, puts on her high heels, and walks to the Sears and gets a full-time minimum wage job answering phones. That minimum wage job saved our house, and more importantly, it saved our family. And I always think of this as the lesson my mama taught me, and that is, no matter how hard it looks, and no matter how scared you are, when it comes down to it, you reach down deep, you find what you have to find, you pull it up, and you take care of the people you love. Now, it was only years and years later that I came to understand that's not just the lesson my mama taught me. That's what millions of people across this country do every day. That no matter how scared they are, no matter how hard the path looks, they reach down deep, they find what they have to find, they pull it up, and they take care of the people they love. That's what we do in this country. But it was only years after that that I came to understand that same story is a story about government. Because here's the thing, when I was a girl, a minimum wage job in America, full-time minimum wage job, would support a family of 3. It would pay a mortgage, it would cover the utilities, and it would put food on the table. Today, a minimum wage full-time job in America will not keep a mama and a baby out of poverty. That is wrong, and that is why I am in this fight. This difference. It's not an accident. It's not something that just happened over time. This is about deliberate decisions made in Washington. When I was a girl, the question was, what does it take a family of 3 to survive in America? What does it take to give them a toehold in America's middle class? A chance for something solid that they can build from. Today, the question asked in Washington about the minimum wage is, where do we put it to maximize the profits of giant multinational corporations? Well, I don't want a government that works for giant multinational corporations. I want one that works for our families. So, like I said, the boys, they went off and joined the military. That was their path. My path was different. I have known what I wanted to be since 2nd grade. Oh, you laugh. Some of you may not have decided till what, 4th grade? I mean, I get it. But I have known what I wanted to be since 2nd grade. I wanted to be a public school teacher. Can we hear it for America's public school? To do, and I invested early. I used to line my dollies up and teach school. I had a reputation for being tough but fair. I never wavered. I always knew this is what I wanted to do. But by the time I graduated from high school, my family didn't have the money for a college application, much less the sending off to 4 years at university so that I could be a teacher. So, like a lot of Americans, I do not have a straight path story. Mine has some twists and turns in it. So here's how my story goes. Graduated from high school and got a scholarship in debate. Yay! And then at 19, fell in love, got married, dropped out, and got a job. Not exactly the plan, but you know, I picked it. It was my decision, but I thought it meant I would never get to teach. And then I found it. We're living down in Houston at this point. Yeah. Oh yeah. And living down in Houston, and I found what was then a commuter college about 45 minutes away that cost $50 a semester. And for a price I could pay for on a part-time waitressing job, I finished a 4-year diploma and I became a special needs teacher. I have lived my dream job. There it is. I love that work. Do we have any special needs teachers here? Oh, we do. We have bunches. Fabulous. So, back me up on this. This is not a job. This is a calling. I loved my kids. I had 4 to 6-year-olds, principally. And I can still remember their faces. I probably would still be doing that work today, but my story has a couple of more twists in it. And here comes the next twist. By the end of the first year, I was visibly pregnant. And the principal did what principals did in those days. Wished me luck and hired someone else for the job. Okay, so now I'm at home, I got a baby, I can't get a job, what am I gonna do? And the answer is, I'll go to law school. Don't ever ask your friends how they ended up in law school. The stories are always a little strange. So anyway, I found a state law school. By this time we've moved to New Jersey. Whoa, even better. There we go. So I moved to New Jersey, found a state law school, baby on hip, $450 a semester. I head off to law school. Do 3 years of law school, graduate, visibly pregnant. You will discover a pattern to these stories. Yeah, graduate visibly pregnant and take the bar, pass the bar, and practice law for 45 minutes. Okay, it wasn't for me. Because then I went back to my first love, which is teaching. So I traded little ones for great big ones and taught in law school. More twists and turns in my personal life. Husband number 1, it's never a good sign when you have to number your husbands. He moved on. But husband number 2, I'm still on 2. So there he is. I teach. And I don't know, maybe it's like everybody who grows up without money. Boy, I'll tell you what I teach about, and that's money. If there is a law course that was involved in money, I taught it. I wanted to learn it, master it, and teach about it. So, contract law and commercial law, secured transactions, uniform commercial code, bankruptcy law, partnership law, corporate finance, law and economics, I taught them all. But there was one central question that all of my work centered on, and that is, what's happening to working families in America? Why is it that America's middle class is being hollowed out? Why is it that people who work every bit as hard as my mother worked 2 generations ago, today find the path so much rockier and so much steeper? And for people of color, even rockier and even steeper. Is just like the answer around minimum wage. It's who government in Washington is working for. Think of it this way. We have a government that works fabulously, works terrifically for giant drug companies, just not for people who are trying to get a prescription filled. We have a government that works really, really well for investors in private prisons and private detention centers down at the border. Just not working for the people whose lives are torn apart by those places. That works amazingly well for giant oil companies that want to drill everywhere. Just not for the rest of us who see climate change bearing down upon us. When you see a government that works great for those with money, works great for the rich and the powerful, and isn't working for much of anyone else, that is corruption, pure and simple, and we need to call it out for what it is. Corruption. And I want you to think about it this way. Whatever issue brought you here today, whether it's guns, health care, climate, whatever issue gets you up in the morning, if there is a decision to be made in Washington, I guarantee it's been influenced by money. I guarantee it's been nudged by money. It's been shaped by money. It's been moved over a little and then a little more and then a little more by money. In fact, let me tell you a quick story. So go back to the early 1990s and you'll see science is really beginning to get it on climate change. The studies are starting to show, whoa, they don't have all the right words, but they've got the basics about what's happening here and why. And here's the amazing thing. In Washington, it's not a partisan issue. Democrats and Republicans are working together. They're talking about trying to figure out, so what do we need to do? Do we need to give the EPA more power? Is that the direction we need to go? Do we need some new regulations? Do we need new investments? What do we need to do? And then along come the Koch Brothers. Oh, some of you have heard of the Koch Brothers. The giant oil companies, the big polluters. And they get together and in effect say, wow, if Congress gets serious about climate change, that's going to bite into our bottom line. That's going to cut our profits pretty seriously. So they've got an investment decision to make. They could decide, you know, we're just going to stop with the fossil fuels and we're going to move to clean. No, they don't do that. They could decide, we're going to invest in all of the cleanup. You know, how to pull carbon out of the air, how to clean up the water. They don't do that. You know what they invest in? Politicians. They invest in Washington to get the decisions changed. Oh, and here's one of their biggest and earliest investments. They invest in scientists, so-called scientists, who deny climate science. Now think about that. Why would they invest in the people who deny climate science? It's not because they don't understand it. No, they invest because that builds an umbrella under which politicians can hide for decades and keep taking money from the oil industry, keep taking money from the big polluters and say, gee, I don't know, it all seems very controversial. You want to understand the climate crisis we face today? It's 25 years of corruption that has led to inaction in Washington. That's why everywhere, in so many different ways. The corruption infects so many different decisions that it comes to us what to do about it. And the answer is it's not going to take just one change, one statute over here, two regulations over there. No, it's going to take big structural change in our government. That's what it's going to take. And I got a plan for that. Let's talk about the plans. Part one on corruption, attack it head on. We have to call it out and attack it head on. Now, here's the good news. I have the biggest anti-corruption plan since Watergate. Yeah. Here's the bad news. We need the biggest anti-corruption plan since Watergate. So you wouldn't be surprised. This plan has a lot of moving parts to it because there are so many ways that money influences decisions. So let me just give you a sample of a few of these. All right, first one, end lobbying as we know it. Lock the revolving door between Wall Street and Washington. Here's one you may never have thought about, but it's important. Make the United States Supreme Court follow basic rules of ethics. They don't have any requirement to do that. I'm just making friends everywhere. One more. There's a lot of pieces here, but here's one that will really root out some corruption. And that is, make every single person who wants to run for federal office put their tax returns online. Okay, so that's part one. And that is get out your raincoats. Part one, attack the corruption head on. Part two, we need some structural change in this economy. And let me talk to you for just a sec about what this is about. We have now giant corporations that have just gotten more powerful and more powerful and more powerful. And they've sucked up the little businesses, the medium-sized businesses. Shoot, they've sucked up what used to be the big businesses. And the problem with these giant corporations is they just run over everybody. They run over their own employees, they run over their customers, they run over the communities where they're located, and they call too many of the shots in Washington. So what can we do about it? Well, one obvious part is we can have a president who has the courage to enforce our antitrust laws. I'm there. Important, but not enough. Structural change means we need somebody else in this negotiation, in this ongoing conversation, in this economy, also to wield power. That means we need more power in the hands of workers. We need to make it easier to join a union and to give unions more power when they negotiate. Unions built America's middle class. Unions will rebuild America's middle class. We get more powerful unions, that changes the structure. We're talking about a second way to change the structure in our economy. And that is, it's time for a wealth tax in America. It's time. So let me talk to you about what a wealth tax looks like. Here's my plan. Your first $50 million is free and clear. I see a lot of people. Okay. I can deal with this woman. All right. First $50 million is free and clear. This is your accumulated wealth. $50 million free and clear. But your $50 millionth and first dollar, you gotta pitch in 2 cents. And 2 cents for every dollar after that. Okay, it's a wealth tax. By the way, anybody in here own a home? Yeah, you've been property tax. All I'm saying is for the bazillionaires, how about if in their property tax we include what's actually most of their wealth, which is their stock portfolio, the diamonds, the Rembrandts, and the yacht. Okay, that's all. I'm just saying let's include all of it. So 2 cents. And by the way, I want to say to everybody, I'm not proposing a wealth tax because I'm cranky. No, I'm not. You know, some of these guys say, oh, I worked hard, I had a great idea, I worked late. Oh yeah, like anybody else. But I worked late or inherited well, and so this is fine. And the answer is, yeah, you did. Good for you. You did have a great idea, and you did work hard. No one's angry about that, but here's the deal. You built a great fortune here in America. I guarantee you built it at least in part using workers all of us help pay to educate. Yeah. You built it at least in part getting your goods to market on roads and bridges, all of us help pay to build. You built it, at least in part, protected by police and firefighters. All of us help pay their salaries. And we're glad to do it. These are the investments we make as Americans. We are happy to do this, to create more opportunity. But here's the thing. When you make it big, I mean really big, I mean the top 0.1% big, pitch in 2 cents so everybody else gets a chance to make it in this country. Because now comes the fun part. What can we do with 2 cents in America? I'll tell you exactly what we can do. First, we can have universal child care for every baby in this country age 0 to 12. Universal pre-K for every 3-year-old and 4-year-old in this country. Raise the wages of every preschool teacher and child care worker in America. Do all of that, but I'm not through yet. All of that for 2 cents. Plus, we can make technical school, 2-year college, 4-year college, tuition free for every person who wants to get an education. Plus, we can level the playing field. Put $50 billion into our historically black colleges and universities. And I'm still not through. We can do all of that and cancel student loan debt for 95% of the And by the way, we still have a couple of $100 billion left over. If we did that, that tells you how far off this economy has gotten, the top 0.1%. Okay, so that's part 2. Part 1, attack the corruption head on. You break up that corruption, now you got a chance to get a lot of other things done. Part 2, we need some structural change in this economy. Part 3, we need to protect our democracy. Constitutional amendment to protect the right of every American citizen to vote and to get that vote counted. I've got a plan to make sure that every vote that is cast is as secure as if it were at Fort Knox and not subject to hacking by Russians, North Koreans, or anybody else with a computer. We need to get rid of political gerrymandering. And at the federal level, roll back every voter suppression law in this country, including keeping college students from voting. And just one more. Overturn Citizens United I just want 3 things. Just 3 things, right? Attack the corruption so that we can make this government work for the people. Restructure just a couple of core pieces in this economy so it works for everyone. And protect our democracy. Now, those 3 things may sound like 3 different things. They're not. For me, they all come to the same place. Who gets it in America? Is it something reserved just for those at the top? Opportunity. Opportunity for every one of our kids, and I underline every one of our kids, to get a first-rate education. Yeah. Opportunity to get a good job. Opportunity to start your own business. Opportunity maybe to buy a house. Opportunity to love the person you love and build the family you want to build. Because you want to understand why I'm standing here today. Not in a million years did I ever think I would be here talking to people about running for any office, much less this one. But here's what I know, and here's what pulled me in. My daddy, he ended up as a janitor, but his baby daughter got the opportunity. Got the opportunity to become a public school teacher, got the opportunity to become a college professor, got the opportunity to become a United States Senator, and got the opportunity to be a candidate for President of the United
Hey, I'm Randy Cushing, and I'm the moderator of the Winnicott School District, which is Hampton, Hampton Falls, Seabrook, and Northampton. And I have to say, there are more people here today than there were at the last school meeting. So, anyhow, we're going to do something that's really traditional in New Hampshire, and that's kind of a lottery. We're going to have people who speak when Elizabeth's going to pick two numbers out. Elizabeth's not going to pick two numbers out. Elizabeth's going to hold the basket while I pick two numbers out, so I'm responsible for whomever didn't get picked. And the first number, when I call the number out, raise your hand and someone's going to run with a microphone to you. And the lucky winner for the first question is number 2010. 2010. You must be present to win. 2010. 2010, last call. Oops. One more time. 2019. 2019. 2019. 20. We have a winner over there. Congratulations. And while the mic is making its way to her, does someone see the mic? We're going to pick another number so you can get on deck. And the next person will be 1997. 1997. 1997. And another winner over here, 1997. So this is the first two questions. Line up and go.
Okay. All right. I'm just going to do. I was hoping we could do more, but I get that people are a little anxious here. Okay. All right. So who forgot first? Tell me your name.
My name is Linda Rhodes.
Hi, Linda.
And I am with Indivisible New Hampshire.
Woohoo! All right.
I'm very, very happy to be here. This is the second time I've heard you speak.
Am I getting better?
You convinced me 1,000% the first time.
All right, good.
But one of the, and I am all in for our candidacy.
Yay! Let's just quit there, Linda.
One of the things that concerns me is when I talk to friends and family and people all over the country, they say, we love Elizabeth Warren, we love her policies, but can she really beat Donald Trump? And so I think it would be really helpful for you to tell people why. I certainly believe it, but I'd like to hear how you respond
Okay.
to that.
So that is a really good question. How about we start with, I know how to fight and I know how to win. Yeah. And that is a big part of it. I mean, I think you have to be willing to get in this fight all the way. But here's another key part of it, at least as I see it. I think what's going to carry us as Democrats is not playing it safe. It's not pretending that everything was just fine and then there's this one problem and we get rid of that one problem, it's all going to work out. Because it's not. It's not. We have problems going back decades now. And they are big structural problems. and nibbling around the edges or pretending they're not there is not going to make them go away. So I think talking about, not just talking about, but being willing to confront the big problems in this country, and then producing plans, real plans for big structural change. I think that's what people want in this country. I think you've got to give people a reason to show up and vote, and that's what I'm doing. All right, who else we got?
We got Amy.
Amy, where are you, Amy? Here you are.
Sorry.
Hi, Amy.
I was not prepared for this, so...
That's okay. This is how my students used to feel when I would call them, and they're like,
Okay.
nice day, huh? And,
Right.
yeah.
So, what is your plan? You know, we keep having shootings. It
Yes.
seems like on a weekly basis now, and, you know, it's a big deal for like a day, and then everybody kind of forgets about it, and it goes away. But it's a huge problem,
Yes.
obviously. What's your plan to try to, you know, get the gun
Okay.
situation under control?
So let me start by saying, today, if it's an average day in America, 7 children and teenagers will die from gun violence. Won't make headlines, most of them. It'll happen in neighborhoods and that don't get covered in the news. It'll fall particularly hard on communities of color, but it will happen. And it'll happen again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day. It is our responsibility to put a stop to that. That's where we have to start, the urgency of this moment. That's part one. Part two is, think about what I just talked about corruption. Corruption is what keeps Congress from doing the people's business. The overwhelming majority of Americans want to see us take sensible gun safety regulations. They want to see us change the laws. And that's true, by the way, the majority of gun owners want to see us change the laws, right? Come on. And we know what the pieces are. So the question is, universal background checks, assault weapons off our streets, get rid of bump stocks, and the ability to fire weapons in a short period of time. There are a lot of things we could be doing. So why doesn't it happen? And the answer is corruption. It's corruption. Right now, we have a Washington that is held hostage by the gun industry and the NRA. That has to stop. And then one more part I want to add to this. And I know we're all about to get wet, but stick with me for a minute here.
We love you, Liz!
We have to treat this like the public health emergency that it is. We cannot think of this as one and done, or two and done. Let's get 2 statutes passed and then everybody says, phew, finally took care of that problem and moved on. We can't do that. Back in 1965, there were 5 deaths for every 1,000,000 miles traveled in America. You go back and read back then, and you know what people were using? The word they were using to describe that carnage on our highways. How were we going to stop it? That families were being wiped out on our highways. And the answer was, we decided we were going to reduce deaths from driving. And we did. Some was obvious. So for example, seatbelts and safety glass, some hadn't even been invented. Like, I'm good. Thank you. Some hadn't even been invented, like airbags and automatic braking systems. But the point is, we stayed after it, and we have cut deaths by auto by more than 80%. So here's my pitch on guns. We need to set a goal. My goal is we need to cut deaths by 80% from gun violence. That includes mass shootings, neighborhood shootings, and not rest until we fund it. So thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry we're short on questions today, but it looks like we've got to make sure we get in those selfies before we're all drowned here. let me just say to all of you really quickly, I know this is hard. A lot of people say to me, and it goes back to the question asked earlier, you've got all these plans, these are hard. You've got a lot of pieces, and there's math in it, and, you know, whoa, you have the pay-fors and everything. The experts, and believe me, that means everybody in the United States Senate, tell me this is not the way to run for office. They say the way to run for office, come in, say a few things, get everybody stirred up, or not, whichever way you want to do it. But then quit, smile more. That's what they tell me.
Smile more.
And you know, here's what I think about. What do you think they said to the suffragettes? You're never going to make change. It's too hard. Give up now. What did they say to the early union organizers? Too hard. Give up now. What did they say to the foot soldiers in the civil rights movement? Too hard. Give up now. What did they say to the early LGBTQ activists just a few years ago? Too hard. Give up now. But they didn't give up. They got organized. They built a grassroots movement. They persisted. They changed the course of American history. This is our moment in American history. Our moment to dream big, fight hard, and win. Thank you.